I was born on February 9th, 1988. My mom and dad, Dwayne and Teresa Lanning. Back then, my mom and dad were really big partiers. They didn't make no bones about it. That's just what they did. My mom was in a lot of rock bands, so it was a lot of late nights. Long story short, when they found out that they were pregnant with me, they were still partying at the time. So whatever that my mom had, taken into her body for about 4 months, I had also taken in myself. There was a couple times that she had went to the hospital because she was bleeding really bad. The first time, they treated her and told her that I was okay, and that, if it happens again, obviously you need to come back. The doctor told her that I was not a viable pregnancy, that if I was born, I would be severely retarded, and that I was putting her life in danger to keep me. She wasn't going to do that. She said no. She said, I know he's going to be okay. And against, the doctor's wishes and even some of my family members who, they were just concerned for her, she kept me. And I came out, and I was a almost 10-pound baby. So God bless my mother. Growing up, I was around a lot of partying. They continued to do that. They both had good jobs, but in any old picture you can see when I was younger, there's beer cans all over the place, things like that. Later in life, my dad, he found drugs, and he was in and out of the picture a lot, and I didn't know where he was. He was either out on drug binges or he was in rehab. This kind of escalated my mom's drinking problem, and I seen a lot of things when I was little that I probably shouldn't have seen. I can remember one time we were coming home from some family friends, and my parents were in an argument, and my sister and I were in the back seat. My mom said something that my dad didn't like, and he punched her in the face, dead in the nose. Blood spattered all over the car, and she passed out, and we went into a ditch. Somehow or another, we got her back home. My dad called my aunt, who's a nurse, and she came over to take care of her. The police never got involved, but the police were in my house a couple times because my dad was kind of abusive towards my mother, but it was only when they drank. God has always been in the picture in our family. My mom's side are strict Southern Baptist churchgoers. My dad's family has always been, churchgoers and followers of the Lord. So it was kind of, it almost felt like a mockery because we always gave God his due, as we'll say. He was an acknowledgement. He wasn't really a part of our life, but it was just constant partying. And then if the subject of God ever came up, my dad claimed to be an aficionado of all things Jesus. So that was kind of funny. Had a really big family. My dad had 3 children from his first marriage, and my mother had 1. So I ended up with 3 half-sisters, a half-brother, and my full-blood sister. I spent most of my time with my full-blooded sister, but the half-siblings were in and out of the picture all the time. It was a mess. We had a really big house. My dad had his own carpentry business, and my mom was an RN. So we had a really nice house. I remember it being like a 3,500 square foot house, lots of property. I was spoiled. I had dirt bikes, all kinds of friends. I literally had a skate park in our basement that my dad built me. It was insane. After a while, my dad, which his addiction was crack, it really took off, and he started stealing, writing bad checks. So he was gone a lot. There was no way that my mom was going to be able to keep that house by herself. But she kept us, she took care of us. She did everything that she could do. She did have a drinking problem, but I love my mom to death because if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't have survived. There wouldn't have been any way. So I slowly watched everything go away. The cars went away. We had to sell the house. My parents got divorced. I really think that my mom wanted to get away from my dad. So we moved to Fenton from Flint. In Fenton, I did my freshman year of high school. I remember 8th grade summer, I had a couple friends, and they came over. My mom was asleep, and one of my friends had some weed, and I smoked it. And from that point on, my life just started getting worse and worse. I mean, I was only about 13, but from then on, I just started partying, and I was so confused and upset with the way that my family was. It just made me forget, and I felt good, and people accepted me. You were one of the cool kids if you did the bad stuff. So I thought I was tough, and I started to party and do drugs all the time. After a while, after our freshman year, my mom seen what was going on. She could tell that my grades were failing. She caught me with pot before, come home with alcohol in my breath, leave without being told I could leave, things like that. So she moved us up to a town called Tawas. That's where I would start my sophomore year of high school. I've always loved football ever since I was little, and I've always played it. When I got to Tawas, they had a pretty good football program, except when we played John Glenn, we got smashed all the time. But, football was kind of an escape for me. And, you can't really do drugs and party all the time and play football at the same time. But I tried. And I can tell you some of those days at practice after all-night partying were pretty gnarly. But, as I started to grow and started to become a young man, I became popular because I was on the football team and I was the life of the party and all those things. So, girls started to like me, and I thought things were going better. But they weren't. They were just getting worse and worse, and I was just doing more and more drugs to fill that void. Eventually, the people I was hanging around, we would skip school just to go smoke pot. And after a while, my attendance got so bad that they actually kicked me out of school. They said, "You've missed too many days." So that was during my junior year. So I got kicked out. Once I got kicked out, obviously, my mom was upset, but I got a job and told her that I was going to help her with the family. So that's what I did. I got a job, and I met a girl. Her name was Shannon. I was about 18 at this time. She was my first love, so I don't know if you guys remember yours, but it was a good time, and she really helped me. She wanted me to stop doing all that stuff. So I started blowing off my friends and just hung around her. They were upset, but I knew it was the best thing for me. But after a while, I kind of started to become my father. And it's something I said that I would never do, but I became controlling in that relationship. I started getting mean, just silly things. I can remember making her cry just because I could. I would tell her that I was going to leave her just to make her come, coddle after me and things. And it's not something I'm proud of. And when I look back on it now, I don't understand why I was like that. But I can tell you that now looking back, I could see that it was because God wasn't in my life. I wasn't a good person. One of my God moments growing up, and this is kind of rewinding back to when I was a little bit younger, and I think some of you guys have heard this story before. Me and my dad were sitting around watching some televangelism program, and a guy on the television said something along the lines of, if there's something that you want to be healed of, put your hands on the TV and ask Jesus to heal you. Now what I had these really bad warts on my knees and on my elbows. So I was afraid to wear shorts and, short sleeve shirts because kids would make fun of me. I was only about 10. So when this guy says this, I look over at my dad and he throws his arms up like, "Hey, it won't hurt." And I wanted so bad for those to be gone. And I put my hands on the TV And I really begged the Lord to take those away. Now, obviously, nothing instantly happened, but we know that God could do that if he wanted to. But one night, I remember I was in the bathtub, and I looked down, and there was nothing on my knees. So my heart started racing, and I looked at my elbows, and there was nothing on my elbows either. So unfortunately for my family, I bust out of the tub, running stark naked down the hallway. Everybody's wondering what's going on, and I'm screaming, Jesus healed my warts. And he did. He did. So back to being with Shannon, I got back into partying. Kept treating her bad, and finally she broke up with me, and it really hurt. You know, that was really my only friend at the time, and I don't understand why I pushed her away, but I did. So we broke up, then I'm back to partying, hitting that hard. Just know that before the Lord really came back into my life, that's all my life was one big party. I was just trying to fill this void with drugs and alcohol and women, and obviously that didn't work. So then I decided to move in with my dad, which was a horrible mistake. You know, my mom got tired of the things that I was doing, and I don't blame her. I would make her cry, call her names, and I was just a terrible person. So she said, I think it's best if you go live with your dad. And I did. And my dad was still doing carpentry, so I helped him with that. Still drinking all this time. I even did drugs with my dad. I mean, that just tells you what kind of guy he was. Then I was on the internet one time, and I met this girl online, and she lived in Oregon. And no, I didn't get catfished. She was who she was, said that she was. So I went out there to visit her, and I wanted to get away from Michigan, because all the people I know were just partiers, and my life was really going nowhere. I hadn't graduated. I wasn't doing anything good. So I decide I'm going to go out here. We get there, I get there, and her parents asked me if I would like to stay with them and try to start my life over. So I agreed. Started working with her dad welding, had a really good job. I actually even made a semi-pro football team out there. I was in really good shape. I wasn't drinking. I had a really good job, but there was still something missing. After a while, I was traveling, working, and I come to find out that all the money that I was sending home to her, she was spending on other guys. So I was being cheated on the whole time. I found it funny why we didn't have any money in the bank, and I soon found out why. That really broke my heart. I got really, really mad. I came back to Michigan and just went on a complete rampage of spiraling downward, partying, drug abuse, girls, the same old story. I was doing odd jobs, staying with my mom. I remember hanging out on the beach all the time. I was literally a waste of space. I wasn't good to anybody. It's hard for me to describe. Where I'm at now, I can't even really look at that person that I was. Finally, I met my fiance, Presley. Of course, we met at a party because, as we know, that's all I was doing. She kind of played hard to get at first, and I just kept pursuing her. Finally, she agreed to go out on a date with me, and I told her I wasn't going to let her out of the car unless she agreed to be my girlfriend. So it wasn't like that, but it was funny. It was funny. So I had ended up going to jail during our relationship for, obviously, it was something related to alcohol. And after that, we got out. My mom had sold her house and moved in with my stepdad, so we had to find somewhere to go. So we went and lived with my sister, Stacy. She lives in Flint as well. Got back there. They're partiers, too. I mean, are you guys getting a trend here? Life's still just, I'm completely deluded all these years with alcohol and drugs. It was horrible. So from there, we tried living back with my dad again. Same old story. Finally, we moved back to Tawas, and I got a good job, and we stayed in a little cabin that was $400 a month, everything included. Just me and her and our dog, Lily. We had some really good times in there. Her and I really grew, and Presley became pregnant. About 2 months into the pregnancy, she called me at work crying, and she ended up having a miscarriage. I think I was more upset than she was, and I took that hard, used it as an excuse to drink, so I kept drinking. I got a really good job at a grocery store, and the drinking just continued. I was going from job to job, and I can tell you guys right now, if I would have been Presley, I would have left me. I would not be with me right now for all the things that I put her through. That's something that I will never be able to repay. I can't change the past, but what I can do is change who I am now. And the Lord did that for me, and I'm going to tell you about that here in a couple minutes. I mean, I used to call Presley names. I would call her fat, tell her she was ugly. I would drink at work. When I got home from work, I would drink more. It was all about alcohol. I had to keep the fridge full of booze, and that's all that mattered. Finally, we found out that Presley was pregnant again. And one day, 9 months later, our beautiful little daughter, Adeline, was born. And I remember being in the hospital, and I was under the influence at the time. She woke me up in the middle of the night, and we went to the hospital. But I remember being there with her, and Adeline came out, and my younger sister was in there with me, and they took Addie over to the table, and she started crying, and so did I. I can't tell, I'm sure most of you know what it's like to have a child, but that is, if you don't believe in God, watch a baby be born. It was just an amazing experience, and I would gladly give up my life for my daughter any day. But I kept drinking, and I kept losing jobs. And there even came a point where I cheated on Presley a couple times. I didn't know who I was. I wasn't even a man anymore. I was just a person, a very selfish person, just taking up space. Sometimes I would do the things that my dad would do. I'd be drunk, and then someone would bring up God, and I would think that I knew all the answers. I mean, how blasphemous is it to sit there drunk and proclaim God? I'm really ashamed of that to this day. But all throughout my life, I could talk to you guys for hours about situations that I was in where I probably should have been dead, whether it be from drinking and taking drugs too much or car accidents or all kinds of things, near-death experiences where I know that the Lord helped me to escape those, and he was with me. After Adeline was born, we moved out to Colorado. My dad had cleaned up his act, and he said he wanted me to go to rehab, so I agreed to do that. I only stayed in rehab 4 days, just to detox. I thought that it had finally hit me that I couldn't drink anymore. I thought. It started happening again. I ended up in a homeless shelter out there. I stayed there for about 5 days. Finally, my stepdad called me and asked if I was drinking anymore. And I told him I wasn't, because I wasn't at the time. I'd finally quit once I hit that homeless shelter. So we moved back here, and I lived over in Millington, which is by Vassar. I got a good job, and I hadn't drank in probably about a month. And I had sworn off drinking completely. And then my stepdad one day offered me a beer. So in my stupidity, I thought, I'm cured. I know better now. I know that I can drink, a couple beers, but I can't do what I was fooling myself. because once I started drinking again, it just got right back to where it was. Presley had moved down here from Tawas, and we only had our place a month before I had to tell her that she had to go home because we were going to lose the house because I lost my job again. This has been going on for 7 years. Why she is still here, it has to be God. There's some reason. I don't know how somebody could put up with all the things that I put her through. So after she had went home, I had decided that my life was probably over. I sat in that house. I took what was left in the bank, and I went out and filled my trunk with as much booze as I could. And I decided that I was going to drink myself to death. This is what had been plaguing me my whole life, and I was going to let it take me. I can tell you I don't remember a whole lot, but I do remember that I would wake up and start drinking until I passed out. And I would wake up and I would do it again. I got to believe that went on for about a month. I was probably half the size that I am now. All my muscles, I was so dehydrated that I was curled up like this. I remember a couple times crying out to God and just asking him, when is this going to stop? When am I not going to wake up? Something that, it might be kind of disturbing to you guys, but I want to tell it to you because I think it has, and I believe this to be true, but in that house, I can guarantee you that there were demons in there with me, waiting for me to die. I guarantee it. I could feel just this. I would have these terrible dreams, and I would hear things that weren't there, and I couldn't tell if I was hallucinating because I was so drunk or if the world between mine and theirs was meshing, and it was. One day I woke up, and my mom was standing over me, and she was crying. That whole apartment was just filled with beer cans. I actually had a trash can because when I first got up in the morning, I'd drink a couple beers and it would make me throw up. But I would continue to drink. I had lost my mind. There's no doubt in my mind that I was not all there and that I was this close to dying. So when I woke up and I seen her crying, she kind of cut into me a little bit, but not enough for what happened to happen. I don't know what it was, but she said something that along the lines of, the only person that can save you now is Jesus. And I let out this horrible, horrible scream. I could tell by the look on her face that she was scared. So she said, "That's it, I'm calling an ambulance." She called an ambulance. The paramedic showed up, and the paramedic looked at me, and he checked my vitals and stuff, and he said, "I cannot make you go anywhere, but I strongly suggest that you come with us to the hospital." So I did. I got in the hospital, got in that ambulance, and they took me to the hospital, McLaren. And my mom was fed up. My house, we were getting evicted. So all that stuff that I had in that house was gone. I was in the hospital for about 4 hours. What I wanted to do initially was go to in-treatment rehab. The caseworkers at the hospital talked to me, and they had talked to a treatment center. Treatment center said, "Well, we can't get him in till tomorrow." So she says, "Well, you're going to have to go and stay at the mission for a night until we can get you in there." What had happened is she had misunderstood. I would be put on a waiting list the next day. So I get to the mission looking like a lump of poop. I was near death. I mean, I was pale, I was sweaty, shaking, just a mess. Spent a couple days in there. Thursday rolled around. That's when Pastor Mike comes and talks to us. I was still kind of going through withdrawals and stuff, and I had heard a couple other chaplains come and talk. But it was something about him. I said, I want to go to that guy's church. I'd come to the resolve when I got to church, to the homeless shelter, that the only person that was really going to be able to save me was the Lord. I'd tried it on my own so many times, and it's obviously not going to work. So I said audibly Saturday night that I plan to go to this church Sunday morning. So I get through the door, and I meet all you wonderful people, and I'm getting hugs left and right, and I felt awesome. So we come in for discipleship class, and when the van was running late that day, I think, so when I was coming in to the end of what Pastor Mike was saying, and he closed with, and this is how I knew that something, it was another thing that let me know that something was going to happen today. He said, we as Nazarenes don't necessarily condemn people that drink, but we choose not to do it and advise against it because we know of the things that it can do to people. So I'm looking around like this is a setup or something because, this is what he's talking about. So he gets up here. I don't remember everything that he said. I remember the music. Jesus Messiah. I love that song. I'm in here crying, slobbering, snotting all over everybody. And it was just this feeling was building, and I was scared, but I had joy and peace at the same time. And I knew in my heart that he was going to do an altar call, and I couldn't get up here fast enough. So he does an altar call, and I come up here, and Donnie's got the video of that service, and we watched it a couple days ago, and it still gives me chills. So right here, I kneel down, and folks, I mean, this is it. I knew this is it. It's either the Lord saves me and changes me, or I'm done for. This is going to go on until I die. So the parts of it that I do remember, I'm begging out to him audibly, please, Jesus, take this from me. And I knew that I was just so full of despair and no hope anymore. I can tell you, if what I'm about to describe to you did not happen, that I would be drunk or dead somewhere right now. I keep calling out to him, and everything was still going on in here. But you know how they say it gets really still before a tornado comes? I didn't hear anything. It was dead silent. And I know that stuff was still going on in here. And right there, he didn't say, I'm Jesus, but I knew that's who it was. And in that moment, me crying out and him knowing my heart that he had to take that from me, or I was never going to succeed. I was going to die. I was going to be a drunk for the rest of my life. And what he conveyed to me is, this is why I did what I did on the cross. So I can deliver you. All you had to do was this right here. You've been doing this for 27 years. And I had to knock you down all the way this far for you to turn to me. But this is why I did what I did. That's just what kept running through my head. And all I could say was, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. And we all know that's why he did what he did. So that those chains, that weight, that huge boulder, that stone that was on my back, keeping my face in the dirt all my life, he knocked it off. And then down the road, after all this happens, I have the audacity to ask him about, little life's problems. And he's like, hey, man, What about that huge boulder? You can't carry the stones that are left in your pocket? You're right, Lord. I'm sorry. But I hope that if you haven't, that you get to experience something like that. I can't wait till we get to heaven so I can just kneel at his feet. That's all I want to do. In that moment, I felt so safe and so loved and so secure that it was going to be okay. Then after, I start falling in love with this church, and I start falling in love with all you guys. Completely changed. I'm a new creature. He turned my heart into stone into a soft, fleshy one. All I wanted to do was serve the Lord. All I wanted to do was tell everybody at the mission what God and Jesus can do for you in your life. And then, I thought that was just fine enough. And then people start telling me, like, oh, Adam, you've kind of got a way about you, and I think the Lord's put a calling on your heart. And more people are telling me this. But here, finally, when I finally knelt down and said, I'm done, I surrender, you have to deliver me, or I'm going to die, here he comes. And here I am now. And I love each and every one of you guys. And I'm telling you, you witnessed a miracle. I was not this person before. But all the promises in the Bible are true. It's a gift. I tell everybody, this is not any of my doing. You can't earn any of this. It's all a gracious gift from God. Why he loves me, I don't know. It's like I love Adeline, regardless of what she does. But think of it on the magnitude of God. It's a very humbling feeling. And Pastor talks about this church growing all the time, and I believe that that's going to happen. I've been to a lot of churches, and I've met a lot of pastors. I've never met people like you, ever. I really think that road was meant to lead me here. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when pastor gets rolling up there, I don't hear a man speaking. God is here. So I hope you guys like me because you ain't getting rid of me. So God bless you.